Well, thank you, witnesses, for your testimony. And I'll start off with the first round of questions and move down dais to our ranking member here. Thank you for your testimony. Certainly makes me sleep better at night, worried about Terminator and Skynet coming after us, knowing that you guys are behind the wheel. But in 5 words or less, start with you, Mr. Smith. What are the 5 words you need to see from our government to make sure we win this AI race?
More electricians. That's 2 words. Broader AI education.
And no using ChatGPT as a phone a friend.
Thank you. I would say that we need to focus on streamlining the ability to build large things.
Policies to help us run faster in the innovation race.
Allow supply chain sensible policy.
That was good. So what I hear there is something pretty similar to the races we've won before. Nuclear energy, for example, you know, the Germans and Austrians really led the innovation around that, but we won the race because we put a massive government effort collaborating with our universities and others to win that race. Space, you know, the Soviets put the first satellite up, put the first man in space, but we won the space race because we adopted a framework to ensure that we won. Aviation, automobiles, etc. So what I hear from you is you do need support from our government, but you also need the government to stay out of your way so you can innovate and win this race. How do we incentivize companies to do business here in America to make sure we win this race in America and America leads not just China, but other non-state actors too? I mean, I think that the scariest thing about AI from a capability standpoint is it doesn't have to be a state actor to win this race. It's not like nuclear energy. It's not like space technology. I mean, a non-state actor could just as easily win this race and wield more power than anyone else. So how do we encourage innovators, investment to happen here in America to ensure we win this race? Mr. Altman, you want to start?
We were honored to announce back in January Project Stargate, a $500 billion investment in United States infrastructure. That is now well underway, as I mentioned, getting to see it yesterday in Abilene. The first site was incredible. We need a lot more of that. We need certainty on the ability to build out this entire supply chain, build the data centers, permit the electricity. We'd love to bring chip production here, network production here, server rack production here. And I think the world does want to invest. We have a lot of global investment flowing into the US to do this. We also want to make sure that other countries are able to build with our technology, use our models, and sort of like be in our orbit and you know, use US diffusion of technology here. So that's really important. We need to make sure that the highest skilled researchers that want to come work at US companies can come here and do that. We need to make sure that companies like OpenAI and others have legal clarity on how we're going to operate. Of course, there will be rules. Of course, there need to be some guardrails. This is a very impactful technology, but we need to be able to be competitive globally. We need to be able to train. We need to be able to understand how we're going to offer services and sort of where the rules of the road are going to be. So clarity there, and I think an approach like the internet, which did lead to flourishing of this country in a very big way, we need that again.
Dr. Su.
I would add, I think computing is the foundation to all of this. We want to have more compute built in the U.S. by U.S. companies and ensure that we have a great environment for that. We want to ensure that our technology around the world is also used broadly and in the right ways. So I think the conversation about export controls and rules should just be simple, easy to follow, easy to enforce, and enable U.S. AI platforms to be the foundation, and then certainly the comments around bringing manufacturing back home and ensuring that we have the right talent base are all extremely important elements of that.
Are companies weighing doing business in AI in America versus China? Are the companies making that side-by-side comparison?
I think if you look across the world, there are countries and companies that will ask those questions. If it's hard to obtain U.S. technology, although U.S. technology is the best, if it's hard to obtain, then there's a hunger for AI, and they will choose what is available. And if China is available, that will certainly be an outcome that we would not like to see?
Well, I think I hear the words infrastructure, electricians, universities, regulatory framework, and I think those are things we can help with. I hear words like innovation and talent, and I hear Dr. Sue, run faster. Those aren't things that government can't manufacture talent. We can't make you run faster, but we can give you the tools to do that. And I think it's time that we create a framework so that you have the tools you need to win this race, because you're going to be the ones that win it, not us. Thank you for your testimony, and recommend Catwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to continue that same theme generally about competitiveness. Do we need NIST to set standards? If you could just yes or no, just go down the line.
I don't think we need it. It can be helpful.
Yes.
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 Okay. So in the context of what we're talking about here, we're really just talking, I don't know, Mr. Smith or Mr. Integrator or Dr. Sue, the issue here is if we want to move fast, we want to create, just like with electricity, the standards by which we want to move fast. Here, I would just call it code for code is what we want, right? We want NIST to do something in the standard setting that will allow us to move much faster. Is that right, either Mr. Smith or Mr. Integrator?
What I would say is this. First of all, NIST is where standards go to be adopted, but it's not necessarily where they first go to be created. So we've got work.
Thank you for that clarity.
Yeah.
We're talking about a industry, IEEE, lots of different organizations, industry input, and then they're adopted. So yes, let's clarify that.
Yeah.
Let's clarify that.
I think that's the way it works.
Yes, but you think we need to do that, particularly if the United States wants to lead?
We will need industry standards. We will need American adoption of standards. And you are right, we will need U.S. efforts to really ensure that the world buys into these standards.
Okay, Mr. Integrator?
I think it's important that when you're working with standards, what that allows for is a common vocabulary, which allows for acceleration. And so to the extent that we can step into that role and establish touch points where everyone can agree on specific things, that will lead to an acceleration both domestically and abroad.
And I don't know if, drilling down more on what you think those are, but in general, when I think about the internet and HTTP or HTML or any of the TCP/IP, we're talking about things that allowed us to move faster. And getting those standards established helped us do that. On the export issue, Mr. Intrator, the issue of cloud sources shouldn't be left out. If we say, let's go with Malaysia, Malaysia is going to tell us that they can certify that there's no, diversion of these chips to Asia, to China, and we basically have a way that we can make sure that this is understood and monitored, then we also want access, right? We want access by U.S. companies.
Yeah, I think Lisa's point was excellent, right? At the end of the day, the world wants to be able to build and deploy artificial intelligence in a very broad way. And if we, nature abhors a vacuum. If we do not step into that role, other technology will step in that role. If it is suboptimal, so be it. It's better to have something that is suboptimal than have nothing. And so that is what.
Well, we don't want a reoccurrence of a Huawei that develops faster and then has a government backdoor, and then we all have to raise opposition. I'm for a tech NATO. I'm for the 5 most sophisticated democracies and tech nations setting the rules of the road and saying this is who you should buy from. Don't buy from anybody else who has a government backdoor. Not a good idea. So that's how we get leverage. I'm not so hot on the president's tariff agenda for this very reason, because we're not building the alliances, we're creating the enemies. And what I want to do is get the supply chain here, get the semiconductor flow here, lower the cost, and go as fast as we can.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that's I don't think anybody's not going to agree with that, right? I think that's an excellent objective. I just think that what will happen beyond the 5 NATO companies is that there will be a demand for artificial intelligence, and they will proceed with what they can proceed with.
Dr. Su, what is your view of this about how we win, how we protect our objectives, but we're more aggressive on the export strategy?
Well, I think there is a clear recognition that we need an export strategy, and so having this conversation is very important. And from our perspective, the idea is to ensure that our allies, and frankly, I use allies in the very broadest sense, get access to the great American technology that we have with the appropriate controls in place. And I think you can do both. To your earlier comment, Ranking Member Cantwell, about the need to have U.S. technologies in those countries, I think those countries are actually very interested in doing that, because we do have the best technology today, and using that to really build this broad AI ecosystem is really our opportunity.
I agree. Thank you so much.
The senior senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Chairman Sheehy. Make sure Senator Cruz heard that one. So first of all, thank you for being here and taking the time. If I could just real quickly just confirm that I've heard what you said pretty unanimously, which is we need dramatically more power generation in this country. Is that correct? All right. So, Dr. Su, you just recently did a partnership with TSMC to manufacture your chips here in America. Thank you. I think it's a little bit long overdue. I wish you had we had done more of that earlier. Are those semiconductor fabs high energy users?
Thank you, Senator. We are very pleased with our efforts together with the government on bringing more manufacturing back to the United States. To your question, certainly semiconductor manufacturing plants are high energy users, and we do need more power for both manufacturing as well as for data centers, as you mentioned.
And without chips, this just doesn't work. Like, if we don't have the highest performance chips made here in the United States, this is not going to happen here, correct?
We absolutely need the highest performing chips, and we also need the entire ecosystem for chip manufacturing. So wafers are one piece, but there are many other pieces as well.
And are those chips powered by solar power and windmills?
Today, they're not, but I think there are opportunities to certainly do that.
So do you think it's outrageous that last year, because of the policies of the Biden administration, that 90% of new power generation in this country was windmills and solar panels, and we absolutely kneecapped American energy? We have 1,000 years of natural gas sitting in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, and yet 90% of power generation in this country last year was solar panels and windmills. Does that make this country more competitive or less competitive? Anybody can jump into that one that wants to answer that.
Let me say two things. One, you're right. We need more electricity. I think our industry, it's worth remembering, is only going to account for 15% of the total additional electricity the country is going to need. We're going to need electricity from a variety of sources. Today in the United States, 56% of our electricity comes from carbon. 44% comes from carbon-free energy, meaning nuclear, wind, or solar. We need a broad-based approach, and we need a diversity
But
of
again,
sources.
90% was energy that's not affordable, it's not abundant, and it's not reliable. Let me just shift gears. Mr. Altman, thank you for, first of all, creating your platform in an open basis and agreeing to stick to the principles of nonprofit status. I think that's very important. Do you think that the internet age did a good job between the beginning of the 90s through the 2000s of protecting children?
I would say not particularly.
Yeah, and you're a new father, correct?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
He's doing well?
He is. It's the most amazing thing ever.
Yeah, I don't think you want your child's best friend to be an AI bot.
I do not.
So what can we do? How can we work together to protect children?
We've talked a lot about some of the things we're doing here. We're trying to learn the lessons of previous generation, and that's kind of the way it goes. People make mistakes, and you do it better next time. One thing we say a lot internally is we want to treat our adult users like adults. We want to give them a lot of flexibility. We want to let them use the service with a lot of freedom. And for children, there needs to be a much higher level of protection, which means the service won't do things that they might want. Now, we're still early, so sometimes people say, oh, you're being too strict on the rules, and it's just, we can't perfectly like tell this, but if we could draw a line, and if we knew for sure when a user was a child or an adult, we would allow adults to be much more permissive, and we'd have tighter rules for children.
So I think what I would ask is if you could have your team commit to having your teams work with our teams to make certain that we put together the right framework early on, I think is the best way we can move forward, because we don't want to over-regulate, but we can't repeat the mistakes of the internet and social media era where children got harmed.
We'd be delighted to work with you all on that.
Thank you.
It's super important.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing about what you said? This idea of AI and social relationships, I think this is a new thing that we need to pay a lot of attention to. People are relying on AI more and more for life advice, sort of emotional support, that kind of thing. It's a newer thing in recent months, but I don't think it's all bad, but I think we have to like understand it and watch it very carefully.
All right, thank you. And thank you for that commitment. It's very appreciated. I've talked to your team already, good people.
Great.
Mr. Intrator, real quickly, can you talk about the intersection between the importance of a robust stablecoin ecosystem here in America and how that has a future with payments and how AI will factor into that? Because I don't think people see how this fits into the broader puzzle.
So thank you for the question. And we did start out as a crypto-based company, hobby that kind of got away from us a little bit. Look, I think that stable coins, crypto, AI, they share certain DNA in common, which is that they are attempts to build into a future where new technology will make things better for society. And there is a huge potential for us to use stable coins, crypto, and AI in a combination for better outcomes.
All right, thank you. And that was the quickest coup since 1959.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Senator Cruz. A lot of exciting things with AI, especially from a state like mine that's home to the Mayo Clinic, with the potential to unleash scientific research while we've mapped the human genome and we have rare diseases that can be solved. So there's a lot of positive, but we all know, as you've all expressed, there's challenges that we need to get at with permitting reform. I'm a big believer in that. Energy development. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for mentioning this with wind and solar and the potential for more fusion and nuclear. But wind and solar, the price going down dramatically in the last few years. And to get there, we're going to have to do a lot better. I think David Brooks put it the best when he said, I found it incredibly hard to write about AI because it is literally unknowable whether this technology is leading us to heaven or hell. We wanted to lead us to heaven, and I think we do that by making sure we have some rules of the road in place so it doesn't get stymied or set backwards because of scams or because of use by people who want to do us harm. As mentioned by Senator Cantwell, Senator Thune and I have teamed up on legislation to set up basic guardrails for the riskiest non-defense applications of AI. Mr. Altman, do you agree that a risk-based approach to regulation is the best way to place necessary guardrails for AI without stifling innovation?
I do. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, thanks. And did you figure that out in your attic?
No, that was a more recent discovery.
Thank you. Very good. Just want to make sure. Our bill directs Mr. Smith, the Commerce Department, to develop ways of educating consumers on how to safely use AI systems. Do you agree that consumers need to be more educated? This was one of your answers to your 5 words, so I assume you do.
Yes, and I think it's incumbent upon us as companies and across the business community to contribute to that education as well.
Okay, very good. Back to you, Mr. Altman. The Americans rely on AI, as we know, increasingly on some high-impact problems. To make them be able to trust that, we need to make sure that we can trust the model outputs. The New York Times recently reported earlier this week that AI hallucinations, new word to me, where models generate incorrect or misleading results, are getting worse. That's their words. What standards or metrics does OpenAI use to evaluate the quality of its training data and model outputs for correctness?
On the whole, AI hallucinations are getting much better. We have not solved the problem entirely yet, but we've made pretty remarkable progress over the last few years. When we first launched ChatGPT, it would hallucinate things all the time. This idea of robustness, being sure you can trust the information. We've made huge progress there. We cite sources. The models have gotten much smarter. A lot of people use these systems all the time, and we were worried that if it was not 100.0% accurate, which is still a challenge with these systems, it would cause a bunch of problems. But users are smart. People understand, what these systems are good at, when to use them, when not. And as that robustness increases, which it will continue to do, people will use it for more and more things. But as an industry, we've made pretty remarkable progress in that direction over the last couple of years.
Well, I know we'll be watching that. Another challenge that has been, we've seen, and Senator Cruz and I worked on a bill together for quite a while, and that's the Take It Down Act. And that is that we're increasingly seeing internet activity where kids looking for a boyfriend or girlfriend, maybe they put out a real picture of themselves, it ends up being distributed at their school, or someone tries to scam them from financial gain, or it's AI, as we've increasingly seen, where it's not even someone photos, but someone puts a fake body on there. And we've had about over 20 suicides in 1 year of young people because they felt like their life was ruined because they were going to be exposed in this way. So this bill we passed, and through the Senate and the House, the First Lady supported it, and it's headed to the President's desk. Could you talk about how we can build models that can better detect harmful deepfakes? Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing that. OpenAI is doing that. A number of us are. And I think the goal is to first identify content that is generated by AI. And then often it is to identify what kind of content is harmful. And I think we've made a lot of strides in our ability to do both of those things. There's a lot of work that's going on across the private sector in partnership with groups like NCMEC to then collaboratively identify that kind of content so it can be taken down. We've been doing this in some ways for 25 years since the internet, and we're going to need to do more of it.
And on the issue, last question, Mr. Chair, since the last one was about your bill, I figure it's okay. The newspapers, and you testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Mr. Smith, about the bill. Senator Kennedy and I still think that there's an issue here about negotiating content rates. We've seen some action recently in Canada and other places. Can you talk about those evolving dynamics with AI developers and what's happening here to make sure that content providers and journalists get paid for their work?
Yeah, it's a complicated topic, but I'll just say a couple of things. First, I think we should all want to see newspapers in some form flourish across the country, including, say, rural counties that increasingly have become news deserts. Newspapers have disappeared. Second, and it's been the issue that we discussed in the Judiciary Committee, there should be an opportunity for newspapers to get together and negotiate collectively. We've supported that. That will enable them to basically do better. Third, every time there's new technology, there is a new generation of a copyright debate. That is taking place now. Some of it will probably be decided by Congress, some by the courts. A lot of it is also being addressed through collaborative action, and we should hope for all of these things to, I'll just say, strike a balance. We want people to make a living creating content, and we want AI to advance by having access to data.
Okay, thanks. I'll ask other questions on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. You know, Senator Klobuchar asked whether AI will lead us to heaven or hell. It reminded me of a famous observation by Yale Law professor Grant Gilmore, that in heaven there is no law, and the lion will lie down with the lamb. In hell, there is nothing but law, and due process is meticulously observed. Let me ask you this, and this is to each of the four witnesses. In the race for AI, who's winning, America or China? If the answer is America, how close is China to us? And what do we do to make sure the answer remains America will win? Mr. Altman, we'll start with you.
It is our belief that the American models, including some models from our company, OpenAI, and Google and others, are the best models in the world. It's very hard to say how far ahead we are but I would say not a huge amount of time. And I think to continue that leadership position and the influence that comes with that, and all of the incredible benefits of the world using American technology products and services, the things that my colleagues have spoken about here, the need to win in infrastructure, sensible regulation that does not slow us down, this sort of spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship that I think is a uniquely American thing in the world. None of this is rocket science. We just need to keep doing the things that have worked for so long and not make a silly mistake.
Dr. Su?
I'll answer in the realm of chips. I would say America is ahead in chips today. We have the best AI accelerators in the world. I think China, although they have restrictions given their ability to use advanced technologies, the one thing that's very important for us all to remember is there are multiple ways to do things. You know, having the best chips is great, but even if you don't have the best chips, you can get a lot done. So I think this conversation about how far behind China is, they are certainly catching up because there are many ways to do things. I think relative to what we can do, I will continue to say, really ensure that our spirit of innovation is allowed to work. And that is having very supportive government policies to do that, having very consistent policies, and allowing us to do what we do best, which is innovate at every layer of the stack.
Mr. Intrator?
So I'll speak to it from the physical infrastructure and software stack to deliver that. America is ahead, but it is the Achilles heel from the perspective of the ability, as I started to Better? Sorry about that. So the ability to build very large solutions to the computing infrastructure component of this is an area that we're going to struggle with from a permitting and building large projects to be able to deliver the power to allow those building artificial intelligence to continue to move as fast as they can in the race that we're in.
Mr. Smith?
I think the United States has a lead today in what is a close race and a race that will likely remain close. The number one factor that will define whether the United States or China wins this race is whose technology is most broadly adopted in the rest of the world. This is a global market, and it will be defined as technology markets typically are by network effects. 18% of the people in the world live in China, 4% live in the United States, 78% live somewhere else. The lesson from Huawei and 5G is whoever gets there first will be difficult to supplant. We need to export with the right kinds of controls. We need to win the trust of the rest of the world. We need to have the financial architecture that gets not only to the countries that are industrialized, but the nations, say, across Africa, where typically China and Huawei have done so well.
So some of my colleagues have made reference to standards as something that is desirable, and I will say standards is often code word for regulations, and indeed the EU's stifling standards concerning the internet is what killed tech in Europe. We are seeing now state legislatures mimicking the EU, such as California's SB 1047, which thankfully was overwhelmingly defeated, but would have created essentially a California DMV for AI model registration. How harmful would it be to winning the race for AI if America goes down the road of the EU and creates a heavy-handed prior approval government regulatory process for AI?
I think that would be disastrous. To give a more specific answer to your previous question, which I think touches on why it would be so bad, there are three key inputs to these AI systems. There's compute, all the infrastructure we're talking about. There's algorithms that we all do research on, and there's data. If you don't have any one of those, you cannot succeed in making the best models. And as Brad said, the way for America to influence the world here is to have the technology that people most want to use and most adopt. The world uses iPhones and Google and Microsoft products, and that's wonderful. Like, that's how we have our influence. We don't want that to stop happening. So systems that stop us on any of these areas, you know, if we have if we have rules about what data we can train on that are not competitive with the rest of the world, then things can fall apart. If we are not able to build the infrastructure, and particularly if we're not able to manufacture the chips in this country, the rules can fall apart. If we can't build the products that people want, that naturally win in the market, and I think people do want to use American products, we can make them the best. But if we're prevented from doing that, people will use a better product made from somebody else that doesn't have the sort of, you know, that is not stymied in the same way. So it is, I am nervous about standards being set too early. I'm totally fine, you know, with the position some of my colleagues took that standards, once the industry figures out what they should be, it's fine for them to be adopted by a government body and sort of made more official. But I believe the industry is moving quickly towards figuring out the right protocols and standards here, and we need the space to innovate and to move quickly.
So if each of you could briefly answer that question, because my time's expired, so I want to be respectful of that.
I agree with the comments that Sam put up.
I agree, and I would just say, and I think the point you're making is we have to be very careful not to have these pre-approval requirements, including at state levels, because that would really slow innovation in the country.
I think that a patchwork of regulatory overlays will cause friction in the ability to build and extend what we're doing.
Thank you. Senator Curtis. Schatz? Senator Schatz. Sorry, apologies.
No problem, Chairman. Thank you for being here. I just want to follow up on the Chairman's question and a sort of, it may be an emerging consensus on the committee. Okay. I don't think there's anybody, even on this side of the dais, that's proposing a sort of European-style pre-approval. I think there are some people who would like to do nothing at all in the regulatory space, but I think most people understand that some guardrails, those are the words that you use, Mr. Altman, rules and guardrails are necessary. Are you saying that self-regulation is sufficient at the current moment?
No, I think some policy is good. I think it is easy for it to go too far, and as I've learned more about how the world works, I'm more afraid that it could go too far and have really bad consequences. But people want to use products that are generally safe. You know, when you get on an airplane, you kind of don't think about doing the safety testing yourself. You're like, this is, well, maybe this is a bad time to use the airplane example. But you kind of like want to just trust that you can get on it. It's an
excellent time to use the airplane example. But I think your point is exactly right, is that, look, there is a race, but we need to understand what we're racing for, right? And it also has to do with American values. It's not just a sort of commercial race so we can edge out our near-peer competitor, both in the public sector and the private sector. We're trying to win a race so that American values prevail internationally. Mr. Smith, I want to move on to another topic. It seems to me that on the consumer side, that one of the most basic rights of a user on the internet is to understand what they're looking at or listening to, and whether or not it was created solely by a person using an AI, or automatically generated using AI. Do you think a labeling regime, not a prohibition on the use of AI, but just a disclosure, especially as it relates to images, music, creativity, do you think a label would be helpful for consumers?
Generally, yes, and I think that's what we in the industry have been working to create. I think you're right to make the distinction and focus especially on, say, images, video, audio files. There's a standard called C2PA that we and a number of companies now have been advancing. It has content credentials. It enables people to know where something was created, who created it, and I think you're right to know whether it was created by a person, by AI, or a person with the help of, say, AI.
I just want to use sort of common language, not the language that all of you use or that we've all learned to use. When you talk about the data as one of the three elements that makes a model work, data really is intellectual property. It is human innovation, human creativity. And I do think we may have a disagreement, and I agree with Senator Klobuchar about the need to understand that these models have been trained on data, but what we're really talking about is human achievement all the way up to now. And I have a deep worry. Look, I'm actually an optimist in the energy space and the public service space. Certainly in health innovation, there are a lot of really exciting opportunities here. But we got to pay people for their knowledge. And I am concerned that these models are going to be so successful in spitting out what appears to be knowledge that we're going to, on the back end, not pay people for all of the inputs. And we will have a sort of stalling out of these models. And you talked about attention, but I'm trying to figure out what the tension really is other than you'd like to pay as little as possible for these inputs. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Well, you had me until the last sentence.
I know.
Hey, look, we create intellectual property. We respect intellectual property. So we're emphatically of the view that intellectual property and the creation of it should be rewarded. Ultimately, intellectual property laws are always about drawing the line. It's really the line that you referred to. In copyright, there is expression that is protected. If you write a book and somebody copies it, then you are entitled to be paid. But there are ideas. If someone reads your book, if someone remembers that Shakespeare wrote a story about two teenagers who fell in love,
sure, then that's fair use.
Then that's fair use. That's why this country,
that's where the
Congress
tension
created
is.
it. That's what we need to focus on.
With your permission, Chairman, I want to ask one final question.
Proceed.
Thank you. I'm actually quite excited about the prospect that in 20 years people are going to say, remember when you had to wait on the phone to talk to Kaiser Permanente or the VA? So I just, maybe Mr. Altman and Mr. Smith, I want you to, a buddy of mine used to say, paint a picture and paint me in it, okay? For the government actually delivering services, I want you to describe what an AI agent or AI can do to kind of reduce those pain points that we accept as a fact of life in interacting with the government. It seems to me so much of what makes us irritated with the government is the lack of sorting data that exists somewhere, but we can't get access to it. So just very quickly, you have 15 seconds each for some cheerleading.
I can imagine a future where the U.S. government offers a AI-powered service that makes it really easy to use all government services to get great healthcare, to get great education. You have this thing in your pocket, and if you have any medical problem, you get an answer. If you need to, like appeal something on some process you're having with the government or file your taxes or whatever, you just do it instantly. You have an agent in your pocket fully integrated with the United States government, and life is easy.
Anything to add?
Remember when you had to stand in line to renew your driver's license? Remember when you didn't know how to report a pothole that needed to be repaired on your street? Remember when you had a fender bender in a car and you had to fill out all these forms and talk to all these people to get insurance coverage? Now you can do it all with one AI system. You can use your phone. And by the way, you can do this today in Abu Dhabi. We need to bring it to America.
Thank you.
Senator Budd.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, thank you all for being here. I've enjoyed various conversations with each of you. The ability for the U.S. to deploy new energy generation capacity and upgrade its grid, it's in many ways the key to the race against China. Energy is how we can win, and it's also how we can lose. Permitting in this country, it takes too long. China's command and control system means that they will not fail to deploy the energy needed to achieve the scale necessary to develop the most advanced models, which will drive all to the benefit of AI. So I'm glad to be working with Senator Lummis on the FREE Act, which would set up a permit by rule structure, which would let large projects meet comprehensive standards at the front end instead of dragged out on a case-by-case process. So we all want to protect the environment, and we all want to maintain U.S. economic and technological leadership. So, Mr. Intrator, what has CoreWeave's experience been in contracting power? And are you concerned that the current permitting system can make it hard for the U.S. to achieve capital investment and the scale needed to win this AI race?
So, as you said, access to power, access to scale power is certainly one of the keys to our ability to win this race. There are others, but it is one that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I separated the comment into access to power and access to scale power because I do think that we are moving towards a a period of this race where the size, the magnitude of the infrastructure that is being required to move our artificial intelligence, the labs that are building it, the companies that are building it forward at the velocity that's necessary is going to be a specific challenge that really requires a lot of thought. We have a huge part of our organization focused on not just getting access to power, but getting access to the size and scale of power that's going to be able to build the infrastructure, at the scale of Abilene or close to it, in order to, allow this to move forward. It's tough, right? And it will get harder as we move through time, because the existing infrastructure that does have opportunities, it has some level of elasticity, is going to be consumed. And once that is consumed, you're going to get down to kind of a first principle. How do we get power online now? And that's really going to be challenging within the regulatory environment as it currently is configured.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, a similar question. How is Microsoft trying to secure power for its data centers? I mean, we read about that in the news recently, but what does federal policy need to focus on to make sure that we don't lose this race because we can't get enough energy?
Well, we invest to bring more electricity generation onto the grid and then to bring it through the grid to our data centers. We probably have more permitting applications in more countries than quite possibly any company on the planet. Last time I looked at it, it was 872 applications in more than 40 countries. The number one challenge in the United States when it comes to permitting, interestingly enough, is not local, it's not state, it is the federal wetlands permit that is administered by the Army Corps of Engineers. We can typically get our local and state permits done in about 6 to 9 months. The wetlands permit is taking often 18 to 24 months. Both the outgoing Biden administration and the incoming Trump administration have focused on this. But if we could just solve that, we could accelerate a lot here in this country.
Very helpful. Thank you. Mr. Altman, much has been made about the Chinese open source models like DeepSeek. We spoke about that a month or two ago. A concern that I have is that accessible Chinese models promoted by the Chinese Communist Party might be an attractive option for AI application developers to build on top of, particularly in developing world economies. So how important is U.S. leadership in either open source or closed AI models?
I think it's quite important to lead in both. We realize that we, OpenAI, can do more to help here, so we're going to release an open source model that we believe will be the leading model this summer because we want people to build on the US stack. In terms of closed source models, a lot of the world uses our technology and the technology of our colleagues. We think we're in good shape there.
So how could federal policy further help encourage AI ecosystem to be developed right here in the US?
Well, you touched on a great point with energy. I think it's hard to overstate how important energy is to the future here. Eventually, chips, network gear, that will be made by robots, and we'll make that very efficient, and we'll make that cheaper and cheaper. But an electron is an electron. Eventually, the cost of intelligence, the cost of AI will converge to the cost of energy, and if it'll be how much you can have, the abundance of it will be limited by the abundance of energy. So in terms of long-term strategic investments for the U.S. to make, I can't think of anything more important than energy. Chips and all the other infrastructure also, but energy is where I think this ends up.
Thank you.